Hi, I'm Suzanne Johnson, Chief Advisor of the Ergonomics Unit for Workplace Health and Safety Queensland. Do your workers physically or manually lift, move and carry objects as part of their job? If you're providing how to lift training programs for your workers, you are not alone. Today, I want to challenge your mindset about how to lift training and reveal the truth about how to effectively prevent hazardous manual task related injuries. By the end of the presentation, you'll have a better understanding that any type of training alone is not a control for hazardous manual tasks, and about how to control the risk and what type of training you should be providing to support your risk management processes. Firstly, what do we mean when we say how to lift training? We mean training workers in techniques such as bending their knees, keeping their back straight, abdominal bracing, warming up and stretching exercises. How to lift training programs don't actually prevent injuries, nor are they compliant with your work health and safety obligations. You are most likely wasting valuable time and resources by providing this type of training. Let's set the scene about why how to lift training became widespread and find out why it's still being used. In mid-2020, we surveyed employers, consultants and workers on this topic, and we had close to 2,000 responses. The results showed that 75% of all employers who had manual tasks in their workplace had conducted how to lift training in the past 2 years. And over half of respondents believed that how to lift training by itself was an effective way to reduce injuries from hazardous manual tasks. Over 85% of our respondents also thought how to lift training was a necessary part of preventing strains and sprains. Even when employers did not think it prevented injuries, nearly 70% still provided the training to their workers. You can see that there is a widespread belief that lifting training is effective and necessary.
So where does this approach come from? It's come from weight training and gym programs where this technique is used to protect people and optimise performance during workouts. It's also used in hospital clinic settings to reduce pain during back injury rehab. But this is where the approach should stay. Studies have consistently proven that how to lift training is not effective in preventing injuries. One study looked at the effect how to lift training had on injury rates for baggage handlers, postal and construction workers, as well as workers who lifted and moved patients. In the study, some of the workers were provided how to lift training as the sole control for lifting risks, while the others received no training at all. In other trials, some workers were given a single education session while some received extensive training and feedback. Regardless of the type or extent of training workers received, there was no evidence that the training gave any form of protection from back pain or disability. In a separate literature review of how to lift training, where 209 studies were screened, it found that while workers who participated in how to lift training could recall the techniques they were shown, they weren't applying these techniques at work. Often, workers could not lift the way they were taught because of the nature of the task, for example, lifting from under low racking in a warehouse, or because of how the work was organised, such as staffing schedules. Not only is the training ineffective, but it is not compliant as a risk control or as training content under work health and safety laws. Queensland's work health and safety laws state manual task risk controls must eliminate or reduce the risks created by the task. These risks include force, weight, repetition, vibration, duration, or awkwardness. There are also psychosocial risk factors such as mental stress and work pressures that contribute either directly or indirectly to sprains and strains. Teaching lifting techniques does not change the worker's behaviour, change any of the risk factors that make lifting a hazard in the first place, or prevent back pain, reduce the rate or cost of lower back injuries, or reduce subsequent disability, or improve actual lifting activities.
In our survey, it was encouraging to find that the majority of employers were using additional measures to control hazardous manual task risks. But it still highlighted 25% of employers who are relying solely on How to Live training. If the research is telling us that this type of training doesn't work, why does the approach continue to be popular in workplaces? It's time to review these entrenched practices and beliefs and shift the way we look at how hazardous manual tasks are assessed and managed. When you look at the big picture, there are many elements other than just the lifting technique that must be considered.
I'm going to give you a scenario so we can look at how a workplace can manage hazardous manual task risks using high order controls and where training fits in to support these controls. I want you to picture a day in the life of Jenny, a cleaner at a large suburban high school. Jenny works a split shift from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and then again from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Jenny's work includes vacuuming, mopping, sweeping, emptying rubbish bins, cleaning windows and other general cleaning tasks. She works in a team of 4 cleaners, however staff sometimes call in sick, leaving only 3 staff on shift to complete all of the work, which increases the workload for everyone. The best solutions for hazardous manual tasks are ones on the high order end of the hierarchy of controls. High order solutions include eliminating tasks, redesigning equipment, and looking at workplace layout and processes to reduce risks. In Jenny's workplace, the workers got together with management and completed a risk assessment and are managing the risks by implementing controls such as installing a low sink tap and hose to fill the buckets, supplying mop buckets with wheels and a decanting station to reduce handling of bulky and awkward chemical containers. The workplace are currently looking and trialling the use of microfiber mops. Adding the hose has eliminated the task of lifting the bucket into the sink. The force of carrying buckets has been eliminated by using buckets with wheels. And the decanting station is an equipment design control that, while it does not eliminate the task, it has reduced the wrist and shoulder force Jenny needs to use to handle bulk chemicals. We'll come back to Jenny's scenario in a second, but first let me acknowledge that the right hazardous manual task training does have a role to play in risk management. Once controls that modify the workplace equipment or task have been introduced, training workers is very important. This is also where safe work procedures fit into the picture. So, what training should you provide workers now that you know How to Live training does not work and is not compliant?
The type of training you must do is quite clear under work health and safety laws. It should focus on basic risk management skills for hazardous manual tasks and include information about the work or task being performed and what risk factors are associated with the job, and the control measures the workplace has implemented to manage these risks. Sections 39 of the Work Health and Safety Reg and Section 4 of the Hazardous Manual Task Code of Practice outline what's required in the training. It doesn't make any mention of How to Live training. If our inspectors visit your workplace, they may look at your hazardous manual task training content and will issue statutory notices for non-compliance with these requirements. The tips for hazardous manual task training on our website will help you implement compliant hazardous manual task training. It's customizable for your workplace and includes all the elements your training must include, such as risk factors, the cause of risk, controls, reporting and recording. For advice on compliant hazardous manual task controls, refer to Section 60 of the Work Health and Safety Reg and the Hazardous Manual Task Code of Practice. So, what would training look like for Jenny, our cleaner? Let's look at Jenny's typical tasks. The nature of her mopping task involves getting the bucket from the storeroom, filling it with water and chemicals, wheeling it to the area to be mopped, mopping the floor, wringing the mop out, emptying contents of the bucket, taking the bucket back to the storeroom. Examples of the hazardous manual task risk factors for this task that should be in the training are forceful exertions while handling the bottles of chemicals and buckets full of water, including liquid contents that are likely to move, the duration of the task, and then the psychosocial risk factors, particularly the work demands
There are a lot of tasks that need to be completed and time pressure as work needs to be completed with a certain time frame. The training also needs to address what the controls are and the safe work procedures. In Jenny's case, the training would be about the chemical decanting station to decrease handling of chemical bottles, using the low sink and tap with a hose so buckets don't need to be lifted in and out of high sinks, and using the wheel bucket to eliminate carrying. Relevant reporting and recording processes need to be included in the training. For Jenny's workplace, this includes the faulty equipment register. If the decanting station wasn't working or the wheels on the mop bucket were faulty, Jenny and other workers need to be trained in how to report this issue. Similarly, if Jenny was experiencing a shoulder pain as a result of her work, she would be trained in how to report this. Record the details of your training, including the topics covered, who conducted it, and the workers who attended. If Jenny's workplace follows the Tips for Hazardous Manual Task training template, she would have been effectively trained in how to manage hazardous manual task risks in her job. As you can see, using high-order controls and providing thorough hazardous manual task training is much more effective than relying on how to lift training. At the beginning of this presentation, I said I wanted to challenge your thinking on the effectiveness of how to lift programs. I hope I've done that. Now, I have another challenge for you. Check out our resources for hazardous manual task risk management and download the training template. Manage your hazardous manual task risks and take a more holistic approach. Review your current training and look at your gaps. And get your staff involved. Use the template to start a conversation about your hazardous manual task training. For more information, visit worksafe.qld.gov.au. Thanks for joining me for this presentation. I'd like to finish with a short animation to reinforce that there are many factors which contribute to injury risk and encourage you to look at the bigger picture.
To prevent injuries at work, we need to do more than tell workers how to be safe. We need to think about the big picture and all the factors that impact healthy and safe work. Telling workers how to lift doesn't work. If the layout is poor and workers don't have the equipment, time or support to do their job safely, they might be injured. Make sure workers have the right equipment. Talk to your workers and supply chain to design better ways of working. Support safety. Provide resources and enough workers to do the work. Think about the big picture. Systems thinking for a healthy and safe workplace.